Infinities Defiance of Fate is a strategic adventure tabletop game for 2 to 4 players. Infinities combines the genres of science fiction and fantasy and the gameplay elements of strategy card games and tactical, objective-based war games. Players must use a blend of planning and adaptation to complete the most objectives per turn, using unique character abilities, cards, dice rolls, and positioning on a modular, player-created map. With a constantly changing game state, no 2 games of Infinities are the same. Infinities supports 2 major game modes. In Adventure mode, players progress through a branching story, 1 chapter at a time, using an adventure guide. Each chapter has unique actions, objectives, and allegiances, and can lead to multiple subsequent chapters depending on the game's result. In Skirmish mode, players are presented with a randomized set of 5 objectives. Completing these objectives grants points toward victory. The player with the most points after 5 rounds wins. Let's familiarize ourselves with the game's major assets. Infinities comes with 2 factions, made of 6 leaders and 63 cards. Leaders act as your player avatar in Infinities, and are represented by a playmat, a pawn, and a set of tokens. Cards include units, who can join you to increase your attributes, and abilities, which can improve your game state or diminish your enemies. Each game of Infinities takes place simultaneously in 2 worlds connected by a rift. As players explore, they choose the size and shape of the worlds. Because Infinities is a multiverse setting, all worlds you create are technically canon. This is a turn order mat. At the start of every round, turn order can change based on the tiles players occupy. Players in higher influence tiles earn the right to take their turn first. Players use their leader number tokens to set the order, and a 10-sided die keeps track of the round number. Finally, the most important assets are the action dice. Players roll action dice at the start of their turn to determine what they can do. Leaders can manipulate their dice through rerolls and conversions to craft ideal turns from non-ideal rolls. Now you're ready to set up the game. Place the faction decks and tile stacks on opposite sides of the table from each other. Discard 1 card from each deck to start discard piles. Place the rift tile at the center of the table and have all leaders place their pawn inside. If playing Adventure mode, now is the time to consult the Adventure Guide to determine what chapter you are playing and what your allegiances and game objectives are going to be. Each leader moves from the rift to a new tile from either stack, ignoring event text on the tiles, and looks at their influence. Arrange leader tokens on the turn order mat from highest to lowest influence. Set the 10-sided die next to the mat to the number 1. In turn order, players choose a leader playmat, then place any of their tokens in a gambit track box and 3 attribute track counters at level 1 in each column. If playing Skirmish mode, now is the time to reveal a card from the Scenarios deck. To reveal the game's objectives and win conditions, place 2 0 number tokens to the side of your playmat, which will be the place you track your score in Skirmish mode. Finally, in turn order, players complete their initial draw. Draw 4 cards from your faction's deck. You may discard up to all 4 cards, then draw back up to 4. When it is your turn, roll 4 action dice. Your leader starts at level 1 in all attributes, each offering a particular conversion in addition to a passive benefit. Units in your leader's group increase these levels based on their banner icons in the top corner. Levels 2 and 4 allow you to reroll 1 die, while 3 and 5 have more conversions. Whenever you change a die, it is immediately locked in and placed on your playmat. When all dice are locked in, take your turn by spending the dice to perform actions. Set spent dice off of your playmat to keep track of what you've done. The one time you will not roll or manipulate dice is in the deploy round. This takes place before round 1 begins, and is a chance for all leaders to build up their group and/or timeline, as well as reposition themselves on the map. Lock in 3 action dice set to Tide and 1 to Fortitude, then complete a normal turn. During the deploy round, leaders do not gain gambit tokens, and tile events remain inactive. Now, let's talk about the map. In every game of Infinities, players build a linked map consisting of two worlds. The game begins in the Rift tile. When moving out of the Rift tile, players can discover a tile from either world. After that, players always pull tiles from the world they currently occupy when discovering new spaces. You can move from one world to the other as long as your path is clear. No need to rely on the Rift. A tile can only accommodate one leader at a time after the game begins. To further understand the map, we need to look at the tiles. Tiles have a name and 4 properties. First, they have a type. These are Stealth, City, Sacred, Wild, and Travel. For the most part, these are used in adventure mode for actions and objectives. However, they are referenced by some cards and skirmish objectives, so do keep in mind which type of tile you're in, and which type you need to be in. Tiles also have events. These are mechanics which occur under certain conditions, such as at the start or end of your turn, when entering or exiting, when discovering a tile, or a passive event, meaning one which is active anytime someone occupies that tile. Events cannot be blocked, so explore carefully. Also, tiles have walls. These solid bars on the edges of the tiles prevent movement and reach for power dice damage. When discovering new tiles, remember to position them with no walls in your path. Finally, the most important aspect of tiles is their influence. This is a number in a yellow hex, which represents the tile's presence on the map. While this number is used for some cards, objectives, and other mechanics, its most important function is determining turn order. At the start of each round, arrange leader tokens on the turn order mat in the order of highest to lowest influence. Break ties with alphabetical order using the tile's names. If you want top initiative on acting in a round, pay close attention to everyone's position on the map, and move or flip accordingly. So, what can you do with your attributes and dice? Let's start with Tide. Tide represents momentum and is the resource you use to play cards and increase your board presence. The passive benefit that scales on your leader's Tide is your Gambit token capacity. You'll spend Gambit tokens to use your leader's unique abilities, which we will touch on in a moment. You can spend 1 Tide toward the cost of playing a card from your hand. The cost of a card is the number to the left of the card's name. You can also spend 1 Tide to prepare any card from your hand into your timeline, regardless of its cost. Your timeline is an area to the side of your playmat that can hold 3 cards. In a future turn, you can play a timeline card for 1 Tide, again, regardless of its cost. Prepared cards are a great way to save Tide or spread the cost of a card across turns. Power represents destruction and is used to lower other players' board presence in multiple ways. The passive benefit that scales on your leader's power level is Reach, which is how many tiles away you can damage someone using power dice. Your path of tiles for damaging with power must be active tiles clear of walls and enemy pawns. You can spend 1 power to deal up to 2 damage to a leader's units, as long as they are in reach. Or you can spend 1 power to force an enemy to randomly discard 1 card. This is regardless of reach. Or you can spend 1 power to destroy a timeline card. This is also regardless of reach. However, you cannot use this on a leader if they have at least 1 unit in their group. Fortitude represents preservation and is used to establish map position and maintain your board presence. Fortitude's passive benefit is increasing your hand size. More cards means more possible futures. You can spend 1 Fortitude to move 1 space and draw 1 card or cycle 1 card. To cycle means to discard a card and then draw 1. Movement abilities do not include a draw unless stated specifically. You cannot move in a direction with a pawn or wall in your way. When you move to a new space, pull a tile from the same world as yours and position it in any orientation without a wall in your path. Then move into it. You can also spend 1 Fortitude to flip over an adjacent tile. Flip tiles are not active, meaning they prevent power reach. This is a good way to counter damage from power dice. If a leader is in the tile you'd like to flip, First, steal a random card from their hand and choose a legal direction for them to move 1 space. Other action die results include Gambit, Star, and O. You can use the Gambit action die to gain 1 Gambit token. You can use the Star action die to perform the action of any other die result. Consider this like a wild result. The O is considered a failure. However, you may find some game mechanics which allow you to spend them. Let's look at a basic turn to see how rolling, locking in, and spending action dice works. For this example, we're playing a skirmish in the scenario called Flashpoint. For my turn, I roll 4 action dice and receive these results: Fortitude, Tide, Tide, O. I use a reroll on the O since it does nothing, and I gain a Gambit result. I decide to convert a Tide to Power because I want to make an enemy discard a card to gain 1 point. I also convert a Fortitude to Tide to immediately gain 2 points, because I will have no Fortitude or Star dice locked in. I keep my other Tide because I want to play out a unit from my hand, so I have the most grouped units at the end of this turn. All of my dice are locked in, so now I start spending. I spend the Gambit result to gain a Gambit token, the Power to force my enemy to randomly discard 1 card and gain 1 point, and finally, 2 Tide to play my Sun Lizard Matriarch. At the end of the turn, I also gain a point for having the most grouped units, bringing my total score for this turn to 4. Not bad. Now, let's take a closer look at your leader. On the left is your attribute track. You start with counters at level 1 in all 3 attributes, and increase as units join your group. When a unit is destroyed, you lose that level. Remember that more attributes from units means better dice manipulation and increased passive bonuses, like your hand size. On the right side of your playmat are your leader's Gambit abilities. This set of 4 abilities is unique to each leader. To activate these, watch for the italicized conditions to occur and spend the required amount of Gambit tokens. You gain a token automatically at the beginning of all other leaders' turns, and when you spend a Gambit action die result. Place your Gambit tokens in the boxes at the bottom of your playmat and remove them when spent. You will spend Gambit tokens to activate other mechanics, so managing your amount will be a part of your overall strategy. You can hold 2 Gambit tokens plus 1 per level of your Tide. Think of your Gambit tokens as a stamina system. It rises and falls as you perform mechanics outside of dice actions. The other components of your faction are the unit and ability cards at your leader's disposal. An ability card is typically a one-shot effect which occurs when you play the card. To play the card, spend Tide dice equal to the cost and place it on the table. Declare your targets, resolve the ability, then discard the card. Some abilities have charges, which allow you to empower the card to do something more. Charge effects are shown on a different line and require you to spend a secondary cost, such as dealing damage to your own group, discarding cards, spending Gambit tokens, or passing a dice check. A dice check is designated by these icons. To attempt the check, you spend a Gambit token and roll a die. What you're aiming for is the result shown on the die icon, or a star. You may use one of your leader's conversions or rerolls one time. If you achieve the desired result, you pass, and in this case, enable the charge effect. You'll also notice this card has a section with the constant keyword. This is a property which is active only while the card is in your timeline. Some constants are passive bonuses, while others are triggered abilities. Once a card leaves the timeline, its constant is disabled. Your other cards are units. Units have costs and abilities, including constants in some cases, in addition to 2 other properties displayed on a banner, attributes and health. The attribute shows you which attribute level is increased while the unit is in your group, which is the area above your playmat. You can have up to 4 units in your group at one time. If you'd like to replace a unit while your group is full, you must first destroy one. A unit's health is shown using white orbs. This represents how much damage a unit can withstand before it is destroyed. When dealing damage to a group, place any of your tokens on the target leader's group units. You may spread these however you wish. Abilities can be blocked or cancelled to prevent them from affecting you. If an ability targets your leader, dice, cards, or your tile, you can attempt a Fortitude dice check to block it. Spend a Gambit token and make the roll, just like any other check. If you are able to come up with a Fortitude or Star result, you pass and ignore the ability. Do keep in mind that actions, the things you do with dice, are not abilities, so they cannot be blocked in this way. As a rule of thumb, an ability is something with text on an asset, such as your cards or your playmat. Some abilities allow you to cancel a mechanic. In this case, you negate the mechanic and treat it as if it never existed. While cancels are rare, they are very potent. Mechanics marked with the faded keyword cannot be blocked or cancelled. Make the most of these, as there is no way for your opponent to prevent them. And there you have it, the fundamental knowledge to play Infinities. You've learned about the game's core assets, turn structure, faction leaders and decks, and how to build your own worlds using the modular tile system. Now you're ready to set the stage for unpredictable and innumerable adventures. In Infinities' Defiance of Fate, impossible is an illusion.